Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like to talk about CSS. So to begin with, I'm going to show you what we shouldn't do. So let's return to our paragraph element. Hello, everyone. All right, so we have the words, hello, everyone, the sentence. All right, now we want to style it, but I'm going to first use inline styling. This is what we shouldn't do. Style equals, let's say, font size 25 pixels. All right. Each time you write, each time you end a, so you have style equals, then you have an attribute, and then a value. At the end of each value, you add a semicolon. All right. So you can add multiple ones of these, but let's just see what this does. All right. So we have a sentence that's 25 pixels. All right. And then we do a font family. Let's do Arial. And let's do a color of blue. Right. So we have a sentence that is 25 pixels. We have a font family of Arial, and we have a color, that font color that's blue. All right. So again, what we did is we have style equal, and then we have some attributes, in this case, font size, font family, and color. And we have some values, 25 pixels, blue, and Arial. After each pair, we add a semicolon to end it, okay? And all of this is surrounded by quotes. All right, so this is what we shouldn't do. What should we do? Well, I'm going to introduce a new element, the style element, all right? So here's our opening style tag, our closing style tag. And I'm going to introduce selectors. In this case, I'm going to use a paragraph selector. That's actually going to target all the paragraphs in your document, all right? So let's make all the paragraphs in our document have a font size of 30 pixels, a font family of Arial, and a color of red. Okay, so let's get rid of this. See what happens. All right, so we have a font family of Arial, of a color of red, and a font size of 30 pixels. All right, so now I said just a minute ago, so this paragraph selector is going to select all the paragraphs in your element, in your document. Let's see if that's true. All right, it selects that one. Let's just do one more to prove it, the point. No. All right, so this paragraph selector is selecting all the paragraph elements in our document, all right? But is there any specificity? Maybe there is. Next, let me show you class selectors, all right? So we introduce class selectors with a period, all right? Then some name, or a name or a series of names. First class, all right? And let's just give this, let's keep everything the same except the font size. Let's make it 60 pixels, okay? So now let's see what happens. So, well, nothing's going to happen because I haven't assigned this anywhere, all right? So again, we have what we had. But now let's assign this class to the first two paragraphs. Okay, so class equals first class, okay? Class equals first class, right? So we assign this class to the first two paragraphs, and now their font is very big, all right? I didn't assign it to this one, so it remains the original font. A class can be assigned to as many elements as you would like. An ID, however, can only be assigned to one element. It can be assigned to many, but you shouldn't do that. All right, Before I show you ID, notice, however, that we had this paragraph selecting all the paragraphs in the element. Then we had this class. The class changed the font size from 30 pixels to 60 pixels. The class has greater specificity than the paragraph selector, all right? And an ID, first ID, let's give it font size, let's say 10 pixels, and let's give it a color of blue. Okay, now let's give this one here, this ID. We can give an element one ID and as many classes as we want. So let's give this an ID. ID equals first ID. And we'll see that the ID, oh, it's very tiny. The ID has overridden both the paragraph selector, the paragraph selector is known as an element selector, and the class, okay? So the ID takes precedence. Let me just make that a little bigger in case you can't see it on your screen. All right, there it is. Okay, so basically what we've learned is that we can have element selectors, okay? The element selector could be any element you want. Paragraph, body, table, div, which I'll show you in a little bit, okay? Then we have class selectors. The class selector, again, can go to any element, and the class selectors override the element selector. And then we have an ID selector, which overrides both the class and and element selector. All right, great. Let's get rid of everything we've seen so far. I think we have that. I think we understand that. All right. So next, I'm going to introduce a new element called a div. The div is short for this is short for division. All right. So let's just hit refresh, and we see nothing. Okay. So we need to give this div some attributes and some values, some style, all right? So why don't we give this an ID? ID equals our first div, all right? So let's give it some properties. Okay, so now we're going our first div. Okay, so I'm going to introduce some new attributes, okay, that we haven't seen before. Height, okay? So I'm going to give this div a height, 100 pixels. I'm going to give it a width, let's say 100 pixels, okay? And let's give it a background color of blue. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens. What did we do wrong? No, spelled that wrong. Okay, so there's our box. Yay, programming on the fly. Okay, so there is our box. That's 100 pixels by 100 pixels with a background color of blue. Okay, great. Next, let's give this a border, all right? So let's say, I'm gonna first show you the shorthand notation for border. So border, we could do, let's say, 2 pixels, solid black. Yeah, sure. Okay, so make it a little bigger so you can see it. All right, so we have our div that's 100 pixels by 100 pixels, okay? It's blue. Then we have an 8-pixel border, okay? The border is solid and it's black. I can make the border dashed. There's lots of different options. Okay, so now I have a dashed border. Okay, great. let's get rid of this. Now let's try border radius. Border radius. Let's just jump into something advanced and say 50%. Let's just see what that does. Oh, that makes a circle. Interesting. So now why does that make a circle? Let's make this bigger. All right. So we have a big circle. Now let's get rid of this and see what's happening. So we're back to our square. Our square has a height of 200 pixels and a width of 200 pixels. So what is border radius doing? Border radius is looking at this length here, and this is looking at all these lengths here, okay? It starts actually up here, so it looks up here. So I can do multiple border radiuses. So let's do something, border radius. It's going to end up being the same thing. Let's do 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%. Let's see what that does. Okay, so we have our circle. Now, what did that do? It first looked at this one here. So this is looking at the top here. Okay, this top left corner here, okay? So it's looking at this length here and this length here. So it finds where this length here is 50% and remembers that. It finds where this length here is 50% and remembers that, okay? And then it joins them with a curve, okay? So it makes a curve that's 50% of these lengths, okay? To exaggerate this, 10, 10, 5. All right, so see again, we have our 50% border radius over here. We have a 10% border radius here. So again, the 10% border radius, it finds this length here and this length here, okay? And it takes 10% here and 10% here and makes a curve. 10% and 10%, 5% and 5%. Okay, so that's border radius, okay? Not so bad, right? Okay. Let's talk about the CSS box model and how all this kind of relates. So I'm going to return to our image element, and I'm going to say src equals box model. Okay, and close. All right, so here is our CSS box model. All right, so we have some content. Okay, maybe the content is an image, maybe it's some words. Okay, the content takes up the full width of this that's available. All right, excuse me, it is in the full width of what is available. All right, so then there's some padding, okay? I can add some padding, some thickness between the content and this here. This is the border, which I showed you earlier. The border has some thickness, which I can change. And then there's margins. It's the thickness between the border and whatever element comes next, all right? Great. So let's go back to our div. All right, and let's use image, and let's put our cake, our src equals cake.jpg, jpg. All right. So again, here is our image of our cake from last time, cake. Okay, so let's now style our cake. Okay. Except instead of using icing, we'll use text. All right, so let's give this an ID. Let's give it a cake. Let's call it cake. Okay, that's a good ID. We have some dimensions. All right, so let's leave our dimensions alone. Let's give it a let's give it a border. Say 5 pixels, solid pink. Okay, let's just see what that does. Let's give this guy ID equals cake. Okay, so here we have our image of our cake, and here we have some border, 5 pixels solid pink. Now let's put below that our CSS box model. Box model, all right. Let's not give it an ID, just box model dot GIF. This is interesting. So see how they're next to each other? This isn't what I had planned on saying, but see how they're next to each other? Image elements are inline elements. Last time, as we looked at elements, we saw many of them were block elements that basically were on top of each other. Image elements are inline. So we can break these up. We can put a line break between them, okay? This is a line break, another self-closing tag, and then I'll just put a space between them, okay? And they'll go on another page. Okay, so here we have our content. Our content is this piece of cake, okay? We have a border that's 5 pixels, solid, and pink, so that's this. So why don't we try some padding, okay? Padding. Let's just give it a 20 pixel padding. Okay, so now we have some padding. Padding is some space between the content and the border, all right? So again, it doesn't have to be, so if I put padding 20 pixels like this, that'll give 20 pixels padding all the way around, but maybe we don't want that. Maybe we want 10 pixels padding on the top, 20 pixels padding on the right, 5 pixels padding on the bottom, and then let's say, to exaggerate it, 45 pixels padding on the left, all right? So top, right, bottom, left. These all work in clockwise order. All right, so we have our content, our cake. We have our padding, again, 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 5 pixels, 45 pixels, all right? And then we have our border. Okay, great. Lastly, we can do some margin. The setup for the text for margin is the same. Let's say 20 pixels. Okay, and that's going to add some space between this whole element here and the next one. Okay, in this case, 20 pixels. It has 20 pixels here, 20 pixels here, 20 pixels here, and 20 pixels here. But same as padding, we can do, you know, like we can do 20 pixels top, 50 pixels, 1 pixel, and 20 pixels, and anything we want. All right. Again, top, right, bottom, left. All right. So again, we have our margins appropriately made. Okay. All right. So now, what else? Now I showed you this. I showed you this margin like this, but and the padding like this. But there's you know, a more, let's say, slow way to do it. We can do margin top, 20 pixels. We can do margin bottom, 100 pixels. Okay. We can also do margin left, margin right. We can do padding top, right, bottom, left. All right, and we see what we want. Okay, great. Now, and one more thing. I also showed you the border, okay? I showed you this border. Let's do border the more slow way, okay? So I could have something like this. I could have, let's say, border, I can spell, border color, I can have blue, black, orange, red. Okay, so what will that do? That should give us a border. Doesn't have it, but we need some size. We need some thickness for our border. Border width. So let's say 20 pixels, 4 pixels, 9 pixels, 10 pixels. Okay, and we need a border style. So border style. Let's just give it all solid. All right. So, okay, we have our border, okay, as we expected. We have blue, black, orange, red, and we have the sizes we set earlier. And of course, we have the style, but you could do solid, dashed, solid. There's lots of different borders. And it's, again, it's always top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so that's pretty good. The last thing I want to quickly talk about, I want to go back, one last thing, just to make something very pretty, div. Let's return to our div. Okay, let's remind, we can, make all of our divs like this. So let's give this div some height of 200 pixels, width of 200 pixels, and let's give it a border of 1 pixel solid red, background color of blue. I think we know what this is going to look like, but let's take a quick look. Okay, so we have a div with 200 by 200, a border 1 pixel solid red. Okay, let's make it 3 pixels, but we'll look at that later. Okay, great. So now we can also do something called gradients. Okay, gradient kind of shades from one color to another, blends from one color to another. I'm going to go into more of this next time, but to do gradients, it's actually background image. Okay, so background image, let's say linear gradient. Let's get rid of this. Let's just go from blue to green. Comma. So see how it see how it went from blue to green? It kind of merged these, kind of blended these two in the middle. Okay, so you can also do like this. You can go from red, red, come on, red, blue, green, orange, indigo. I can't spell indigo, so I'll stop there. Okay, so we can make a rainbow. We can do very pretty things. You can do now border radius 50% to make a circle. Oops, 50%. Actually, I think I forgot to say that. So 50% is circle, but you can also do border radius can also be absolute units, like 20 or 50 pixels. Okay, and then it'll just do, if you do 20 pixels, it'll do a 20 pixel by 20 pixel border radius. Okay, but let's do 50%. 50%. Let's get rid of our border. All right. Great, that's kind of pretty. And lastly, very last thing, I want to do a spherical gradient. Spherical gradient. Oh, excuse me, radial gradient. Do a radial gradient. Let's do orange to yellow. All right. All right, so it kind of looks like a sun. All right, that's kind of neat. All right, and we can expand on this, but for now, I think that we're pretty good. All right, well, we'll do more next time, but I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.